Let's talk about gaming accessibility, especially when you're blind or visually impaired. Hi everyone, this is Carrie on Accessibility, and welcome to another episode of the Epic Ally Podcast. This is a special episode where we deep dive into the world of gaming with Jessie from Illegally Sighted. We talk about all things gaming, and we talk about AR and VR, augmented versus virtual reality, and just PC, console gaming, smartphone gaming, all sorts of things in the perspective as somebody who's blind and low vision. We also discuss what developers can consider when developing for low vision and blind gamers. Whether it's on my PC or smartphone or Nintendo Switch, I really do enjoy gaming when I have the chance. And if you do too, and you're looking for physical games or gaming accessories, consider using today's sponsor, InnoSearch.ai. They're an accessible e-commerce shopping platform, especially designed for people who are blind or low vision. They have over 1 billion products from so many different stores like Amazon, Walmart, and Best Buy, Nintendo, even GameStop. It's pretty cool. You can order basically anything. There's free returns, free delivery, and now it's not only available in the US, but also in the UK, Canada, and Australia. If you want to try it out, you can use code COA15, that's COA 15, for $15 off your first order. And a big thank you to InnoSearch for sponsoring this video. I just recently got some Joy-Cons for my Switch, and yes, I did get the one that is pink and green. Anyway, without further ado, let's move on to the interview with Jessie from Illegally Sighted. Hi Jessie, thanks so much for coming on. Why don't you go ahead and tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure. Well, thanks for inviting me. And my name is Jessie Anderson. I am an assistive technology specialist by day. I work for the state of Minnesota, and I work with transition age students, so that's kind of a cool job. And so we really try to help people, going through transition, like, high school, early college, going on to employment. It's one of the things I think that's important to me because, just because we're blind or low vision or have a disability, we still want to be able to live independently. We should be able to support ourselves, support our family, that kind of a thing. So that's my day job. Outside of that, I do a variety of different things. I run the Illegally Sighted YouTube channel. I've been doing that since 2012. And I do technology and game and XR, accessibility advocacy and consulting. XR is kind of the blanket term that they use for virtual, augmented, and mixed reality. So I've dabbled in that a bit. Other than that, I've been part of the XR Access organization for the past few years, doing stuff with the Microsoft Low Vision Advisory Board. So, you get updates in Windows or Xbox that are sort of low vision related. I'm on a group of people where we kind of take a look at that kind of stuff and try to improve accessibility for that. And just little speaking engagements like this, and consulting with indie developers, app developers, game developers, AAA every once in a while. And so, just keeping plenty busy.
That's awesome. It sounds a little like me. I've got my fingers in a lot of different areas. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned your YouTube channel is Illegally Sighted, and I will link that in the description for anybody who wants to go and check that out because he makes some really great content. I really want to dive deep into gaming accessibility today. My first question for you is, what makes a game accessible?
Sure. Well, before I do that, I should also mention, I didn't mention in the first question that you had, I am legally blind. I do have some usable vision. So I do use a combination, depending on what it is, I might use a combination of text-to-speech, screen reader, menu narration, that kind of a thing. With magnification, I might use one or the other or both. It kind of just depends. So yeah, I use that. What makes a game accessible? That's a tricky question because accessibility really depends on the person. I would say first off that I don't know that you can make a game or an app or anything like that perfectly accessible to everybody, because there are inherently things that can happen where, if you design for accessibility for one user, let's say, that may pose a problem for another user. If you primarily put everything in audio, if you have somebody who is deaf or hard of hearing, they won't be able to really make use of that unless you also provide visual or other information like that. But as far as blind and low vision accessibility, again, that really depends on the type of game. Of course, first and foremost, some type of text-to-speech, menu narration, screen reader support, because before you even get into gameplay, you want to be able to adjust the settings. You want to be able to go to the main menu, see what your different modes are and things like that. Adjust any settings, load and save your game, that kind of a thing. Or even when you're in a game, a lot of games now are really complex and they have things like inventories or quests or skill trees, all those types of things, and having that text-to-speech narration really helps. But then beyond that, it really depends on the type of or genre of the game. If it's a 2D side scroller like Super Mario Brothers, there are certain things that you would want to have for audio cues for enemies and pits and items and things. If you're in a 3D environment, something like The Last of Us or Doom or whatever, you need to be able to efficiently navigate that 3D environment. And a lot of these environments are complex. So being able to not just follow the critical path, but to be able to also explore, because developers like to put, secrets or little goodies that you can find. You want to find health or ammo or power-ups or whatever, collectibles. Racing has its own challenges, whether it's off-road, on-road, whatever. So it really kind of depends on the game, but there are a few core types of things like your menu narration, some kind of navigation assist, and then branching off from there.
So if you were speaking to a game developer, what would you tell them? How would you advise them when they are thinking about game accessibility?
I would encourage them to start the accessibility considerations as early on in development as possible. Because too many times, whether it's gaming, technology, or whatever, how many times has a new technology come out, or a new app, or a new website, or a new device, and you're like, oh, that's really cool. And then you come to learn that, oh, you know what, that's actually not accessible at all, or there's a lot of problems with the design or the interface or whatever. And so bolting accessibility on later is way harder. It's much more effort, and sometimes it's not even possible depending on how something was designed. So if you kind of bake that accessibility into the design of your app or your game or your device as soon as possible, you treat that just like any other core part of your development, like your graphics, your sound, your whatever, whatever you would typically put into a game. As long as you put accessibility as a priority, that's a great starting point. And the other thing that I would say is to involve the people with disabilities that you're trying to accommodate for. So if you want to make sure that, hey, I want to make sure that blind people can play this game, or I want to make sure that this is understandable for somebody who's deaf. I want to make sure they can understand where things are and who's speaking and those types of things. So, it's easy to make assumptions or just read some generalizations about things, or you're looking at it from more of a technical standpoint versus a usability standpoint. Involving the people with disabilities in your development early on as well. They can help generate ideas. They can refer you to maybe games in a similar genre that already exist that do things pretty well that you can get ideas from. And they can also tell the developer their own lived experiences is like, oh, yeah, you might think this is actually a good way to do it, but actually this is where that could be a problem.
Mm.
So, sometimes there's things where they develop a solution looking for a problem, or it's just something that's way off. And so, those are a couple of early things on I think that developers could do. And there's a lot of the great thing is now there's so many resources also available. Social media. I'm still on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of other people on different social media. There's many people creating, YouTube content, podcasts. You have things like the Microsoft and Sony accessibility web pages, and even like curriculums now. You have the game, the Game Accessibility Conference, GA Conf archives, and there's loads of great presentations from users and panels and developers. So there's a lot of resources out there, more than there were even 5-10 years ago,
Mm.
where developers can get access to both people and information.
What are some of the biggest frustrations for you when you're playing games, whether it's an accessibility issue or a usability issue?
I would say one of the areas where I can most consistently struggle is a lot of times with the user interface, whether it's menus, dialog boxes, options, or setting screens. Again, I mentioned earlier on, like the map screen or skill trees, any number of different things that would happen to be in a lot of your modern games. I might be able to navigate the world itself pretty well, but games have become so complex that they have so many different systems. You might have mission objectives, you might have side
Mm.
quests, you might want to upgrade or customize your character. Look at something like Diablo, where you have endless piles of loot and armor and weapons, and you're comparing stats. And so, sifting through all of that type of stuff with my low vision
Mm-hmm.
is tedious to say the least. So, when games like Diablo 4 last year actually supported text to speech for that, it's like, oh God, I can
Oh,
actually
really?
play this.
Okay.
Um, and sometimes the world navigation can also be an issue. Sometimes I find the more realistic a game looks, the more graphically detailed it looks. I mean, it looks nice, but that just means that it's easier to overlook something, whether it's an item on the ground or on a table, or maybe you're in like a jungle or you're in some really detailed environment, and I just overlook a narrow little path I was supposed to go down or a ledge I was
Mm.
supposed to climb up. So having some sort of either navigation assists, or a lot of games are implementing even little visual cues. People, there's always this discourse on. I just saw it the other day. Why does all these games have yellow paint? That's kind of a industry thing that they've been doing for a little while, where they kind of highlight the critical path of like yellow paint, and you can turn that
Mm.
on and off. So there's some navigation issues and a lot of just like the readability and things like that. So those are a couple things that really stand out for a lot of the games I like to play.
I agree about the graphics. The more realistic, the harder it is for me to see it. That's why, at least for me, I tend to go back and play simple games like Spyro and Jack and Daxter, and like
Yeah.
I don't know. Those are it's just so much brighter, more saturated, and there's like a lot more contrast. And then when I try to play like the newer fantasy Final Fantasy games, I'm like, oh, I can't see that. Oh, I can't see that either. Or I tried to play Pokemon, I can't remember, but it's one of the 3D ones, and I'm like, I
Okay.
can't see where am I supposed to pick these up? And then those little messages that appear and disappear right away. Those are so frustrating for me because
Oh,
I'm like,
yeah.
wait,
Some
I haven't
message
gone
just
there.
pops up and you just start reading and then it just disappears. Like, oh man.
What are some great accessibility features or implementations that you have seen?
Of course, the last few years, there's been several games that have added menu narration or text to speech
Mm-hmm.
or screen reader support to some degree. And that's been extremely useful for all of those different types of screens I just described earlier. Again, that's just been a huge lifesaver. And kind of what I've said a lot of times before is I love having that feature because then, I can save my vision for actually playing the game and I can use, the text to
Mm-hmm.
speech for, getting through the more mundane kind of tedious parts. And so that really helps. The Last of Us Part 2, when that came out a few years ago, and then they put it in The Last of Us Part 1 remastered. Um, there's so many things in that game that they did. Because one of the things I've been doing this channel for over 10 years, and I've always been trying to think of, I play a lot of first person shooters, a lot of third person games. And I was always struggling with how do you make these big complex 3D environments not just really accessible, but how do you make them intuitive to get around without being super frustrating for a blind player? And I couldn't figure out like how would I even want to do that? And then I saw what Naughty Dog had done with The Last of Us, and it's really slick because you just click the stick in to go to your primary objective, and that'll kind of take you along your critical path, and it'll guide you. There's audio cues for, oh, I got to crouch or duck under something. I have to climb up on top of a semi trailer
Mm-hmm.
or through a window. But then if I want to explore an area, I can do another command and I can just send out a ping for nearby enemies. Oh, I want to do some stealth. I want to make sure I'm not seen, and that really helps for that. Or even combat. Or I can ping the nearby environment for items. So, oh, I want to get that collectible. I want to get those supplies so I can craft more material or craft more items. I'm able to, not only go through the critical path, but I'm not missing some of the side stuff that a lot of other games you kind of almost miss some of that if they don't offer a way to find those things in the environment. And one of the things that I didn't think that I would use as much as I have in a few games is I really like what some developers are starting to do with offering a high contrast mode.
Mm.
The Last of Us series, God of War did it. The Callisto Protocol, Spider Man did it. And I really like the way, again, The Last of Us, one of the things about the high contrast mode, not only that it exists and that there are options for what colors you want to have, but for me, one of the important things about the high contrast mode, that's a feature where like something like text to speech, I want that to be on pretty much all the time because I'm going to always use that. But high contrast is something where I might often want to toggle that on and off.
Hmm.
So having an option, a hotkey on my keyboard or a button combination on my controller where I can quickly, instantly disable or enable that because I might want to play the game as intended, enjoy all the graphics. But then when I get to a part maybe where I'm struggling or I want to make sure I'm not missing something, turn that high contrast mode on. And in a lot of cases, they'll have by default, your character will be blue. You'll have everything will be kind of a lighter, like a silhouette. So your character
Oh.
will be a blue dude. Your enemies will be red. Your allies might be green. Your doors and interactables might be yellow. And a lot of times they let you customize that. And I find, I didn't think I would use that as much. Um, but especially games where you have a combination of action and stealth, I find it really helpful. Like in the Last of Us series, I always called it Predator mode because I would get to an encounter, and you get when you have the Predator vision in those movies, and you just turn the high contrast on. It's like okay, now I can sneak around and I can tell easily where the guys are looking. I can
Hmm.
sneak up behind them and take them out without even being seen. And then when I'm done, I can just turn it off, and I don't have to go into 6 levels deep menus to turn it on and off again.
Mm-hmm.
So those are just a few different types of accessibility features that I would love to see being more common. And then you have things like, for racing, what Forza did last year, Forza Motorsport did last year, um, the amount of sheer detail and customization options for blind accessibility for a hardcore simulation racing game was fantastic.
What kind of things do they have?
Well, backing up a minute, like Forza for the past several versions, they've always had, for fully sighted players, they have different levels of driving assists. So I'm used to more playing arcade racing games. I don't play a lot of simulations all that much. So maybe they can they offer things like a driving line to kind of guide you through, like, oh, this is maybe an ideal way to take a corner. It kind of indicates, oh, you're going too fast. You're going to burn out or wipe out if you take the corner too fast. They have brake assists or steering assists that you can turn on and off. And those are just for everybody, that have been in the game for a long time. But on top of that, then they've added things like, you have audio cues. So you'll kind of hear a car, the car noise will sort of pan along the track. So if I'm coming up to a right curve, you'll hear the car kind of pulling a little bit to the right, saying, okay, you got a right curve coming up. And then they have a different series of just quick beeps that'll tell you, okay, you're entering the curve, you're at about midway, okay, you're exiting the curve, you can kind of start to gun it again. And then there's other different things where if you're getting close to either side of the track so you don't go off of it, there's an announcer that you can turn on and off that will give you like your laps, like you're going through a part of a track and you get best times, or the gradings on how well you took that part of the track. There's like a rally racing style announcer. So in addition to the audio beeps, you can also kind of have almost like a co-pilot call out, long easy left or hairpin right, but they're based on numbers. So it's like 1 through 6. You have like a left turn 6, right turn 4, and that kind of tells you your severity of the turn. So that will give you a clue of how much you might want to slow down or not. They allow you to customize like how much is spoken, almost like your screen reader verbosity. As you get used to the game, maybe you don't want to hear as much of the babble anymore, or maybe you want to hear more or fewer sound effects, and so you can really customize a lot of. There's tons of blind low vision accessibility features and customization. And I just want to give a shout out to super blind man Brandon Cole, because I know he was one of the main contributors for that. And unfortunately, we lost him about a month ago. But that was one of his last projects, and it's freaking amazing, really, what they did.
I love that. That's actually really cool, even though I'm terrible at anything to do with driving, whether real or games. You don't want me behind the wheel.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that there is a learning curve to it. I mean, even for me, who has played some Forza games visually in the past, I still play with some driving assists because I'm not good at simulation either. But there is a learning curve to it. But if you want, like, you can, once you get good enough, the cool thing is with the accessibility that's in there, you could turn all of those assists off, and just with those extra audio cues and feedback, you could be playing a fully simulation racing game along with all of your sighted friends. Like, it's crazy.
So here's a question from a COA member, Metis, and he asks, do you prefer PC or console gaming?
I play a little bit of both. I have pretty much all of the current gen consoles, and I have a gaming PC. I generally tend to prefer, I guess these days I tend to prefer PC because there's a lot more options for things you can do. A lot of your console games, your Xbox and PlayStation games, a lot of those also come out to PC. You get them through Steam or GOG, and the nice thing is, I have games that I bought on Steam 20 years ago. And recently we've been hearing about, like, oh, Nintendo closed this version of the eShop, or a couple of weeks ago the Xbox 360 storefront, they closed. So if you can't buy things anymore, or things like that. PC, I can kind of keep those things for as long as it still kind of works with Windows. You're generally pretty
Mhm.
good. Um, and on top of that, like if things, maybe there is some incompatibility or just the option to add accessibility that's not built into the game to begin with, PC also offers the advantage of mods. So there are
Hmm.
several games that aren't accessible out of the box, but fans or other developers have taken it upon themselves to create mods for anything from Hearthstone, which is this accessible card battler game. Think Magic the Gathering, something like that. Stardew Valley, which is this kind of like farming sim, social kind of a thing. It's a really cool, chill game. I got hooked. I played it visually when it came out several years ago, and you wouldn't think it would be. You think it would be kind of boring, but it's actually very addictive. But it's a cool little game. There's a mod for that. I just learned there's a mod in development for this card game that came out earlier this year called Balatro. It's this kind of really neat take on poker, and I got severely addicted to it for about a month or two. And there's a mod that's in development now that's going to make that blind playable, which I'm very happy about because that's been a big thing this year. And while we're talking mods, I can plug the one of the projects I've been working on with a developer for the past few years. One of, if not my favorite games of all times, is the classic Doom games, Doom 1 and
Hmm.
Doom 2 from the 90s. And there's been this mod called the Toby Accessibility mod. And it's basically a mod that tries to make that game playable for blind players. And last week, version 7.5 of the Toby Accessibility mod came out, and it's in a really good place right now. I just released a video for it last Saturday. I mean, you can play. I wouldn't recommend starting with the original campaigns because the levels are very, very complex. But the developer of it, again, shout out to Mr. Alan D1, Predoa, and all the other team that's been working on that. Um, they've made their own sets of campaigns. So there's Toby Doom 1, which is based on their own levels, but they're based on the original Doom 1 game. Toby Doom 2, which is levels based on Doom 2. And then he's made a separate campaign called Operation MDK, which is kind of its own original thing with more of a story to it. And we just got also support in 7.5 for Heretic, which is back when Doom and Doom 2 came out, Raven Software used id Software's Doom engine, and they basically made a medieval version of that. So instead of Mars bases and demons, you have medieval. You got your wizards and stuff like that. You got instead of shotguns and machine guns, you have crossbows and wands and magical items and stuff. So it's really cool. Like I've been playing these games visually for the past 30 years, and now finally blind players are able to play one of the most influential games of all time. I mean, it's so cool because they also, in 7.5, they've added like a navigation, like a pathfinding system. So when you discover something in a level, let's say, oh, I found the red door, but I don't have the red key yet. And so you find the red key. I'm like, where was that red door? You can pull up
Yeah,
a list of markers, and you can be like, oh, let me just okay, I can go to the red door, and it'll pop down little beacons that you follow, like little breadcrumbs, and so you follow it kind of like you would in something like The Last of Us.
that's awesome.
So yeah, it's amazing. Like the amount of work that they did to that just impresses me. So I've been working with them and coming up with ideas and testing for that mod. So I definitely wanted to mention that because I'm proud of the work that the team have done, and I'm just glad to be a small part of that because I love that game so much.
I love it. Now, here's another question from a COA member, Jared. Where are your favorite places to find accessible games? And I want to add to that, where do you also find these mods and extensions?
Yeah, good questions. I mean, one of the main places I would recommend looking is audiogames.net. Audiogames.net has been around for many years, and the nice thing about them is the website, like when a new game comes out, whether it's an iOS game, a console game, a PC game, whether it's an audio game or something that's been designed for blind players, or whether it's a mainstream game that happens to have accessibility, you can pretty much find it there. They have kind of a game directory, so you can kind of look for, oh, I want to find some action games or some puzzle games or um, things like that. So that's a good resource. I would say AppleVis is good for mobile, but
Mhm.
I don't know if that site is going to be around at the end of the month. So we'll have to see. I hope they are able to save it, because if nothing else, like the app directory part of it has been really, really helpful for discovering
Mhm.
accessible iOS apps and games, not just games, but new apps and things.
Definitely. I've heard a lot of people have used it in the past and really enjoy it. But we're going to switch gears now, and I'd like to get your thoughts on virtual reality. And have you tried the Meta Quest or Vision Pro or any of the other augmented, virtual reality, mixed reality headsets out there?
Well, yes, I have some of them. So, believe it or not, my first introduction to virtual reality was way back in 1995. I actually got to see, I was out at the University of Washington for some stuff, and I got to see, it was this just ginormous prototype headset thing. I mean, you couldn't wear it. You literally, it was hung from the ceiling, and you would walk and put your head into it, and then you would kind of, hold on to it, and you would
Wow.
turn around and whatever. But it was really cool though, because even back then, you saw, there was a couple little tech demos. So like, there was one where you were in a kitchen and you held something in your hand, and when you moved it around in real life, you saw it move in the game because it was tracking the sensor.
Mm.
There was another one where you were flying through an atom and looking at like the structure of an atom, and there was another one where you were like netting fish underwater. So that, I mean, that was really cool. But so yeah, I've always kind of been fascinated with the idea of virtual reality, and I did get into the Oculus Rift when that came out in 2015, 2016, whenever that was, I think.
Hmm.
And when it works, it's amazing, because I have an Oculus Rift and I have the first generation Oculus Quest. And so, a couple things about VR is that the sense of immersion, like for visually, it's hard. It's really hard to explain. You look at 3D environments on a flat screen, and yeah, you can tell you're in a big room, or you can tell you're in like a small closet or whatever. But when you are in VR, like you actually get the sense of space. Like it's not just like this flat screen representation. Like it really feels like if I'm in like this big cathedral style room, you can literally feel how big it is. It's really crazy. So that's really neat. Um, but even more so compared to flat screen games on your TV or your computer monitor, where I have the most problem is user interface, menus, option screens, configuration, anything like that. So what happens is a lot of times, you're navigating a world in first person, but when it comes to adjusting settings or,
Mm.
quests or something like that, you bring up a menu or an interface, and a lot of times they will put a window will just pop up in front of you.
Mhm.
And the problem with that is that what they do is most modern headsets now have what they call 6 degrees of tracking. and or 6 degrees of freedom. What that means, there's 3 degrees and 6 degrees. A 3 degrees headset is where you can look left and right, you can look up and down, and that's about it. It's still immersive, but it's not fully immersive. 6 degrees is where you can look in any direction, but you can also move or lean in any direction. So what's cool about that is if I'm in a real world environment, or it doesn't have to be realistic. It could be animated, but as long as I'm in this virtual environment, let's say there's something I wanted to see better, I can literally just move closer to it, just like I would in real life, and that's what's really cool about it. But what happens is a lot of these interfaces, they'll say, well, okay, we're going to pop up this box. But for your average sighted user, we're going to say, we're going to leave that at 2 to 3 feet away from you. And they tie that to, they want to maintain that fixed distance. So even if the environment itself supports this moving and leaning in any direction, when you pull up that menu or UI, what happens is they always try to maintain that. So if I lean forward, it moves back away from me to maintain that same 3 feet distance away. And so I can't get closer to that menu. And then you combine that with small text or low contrast or all of the above. And it can be a real difficult thing to try and navigate. The headset dashboards are all pretty much like that. So the only prayer that I really had was when I was using VR more, for the Oculus Rift, I would do most of I would manage the store, I would buy games, install games. I would do that through the desktop app, and then I could launch the app from from my computer, and then I could just put on the headset. Same with the Quest. I would do all that management through the Oculus app on my phone, do as much as I could there, and use the headset as little as possible, unless I was in a game. And then even then, it's like, oh, I want to be able to adjust options. So what I would find myself having to do is, I might, I would have my headset mirrored to my computer in my Oculus Rift case. So I would record me looking around at a menu on video, then I would take the headset off, watch the video back, maybe magnify it. Okay, the option I want is the third one down, second one on the left. And then you would memorize it and go, okay, that's the option I want to change. Very tedious, very clunky, not cool. And so
I can imagine.
Yeah, and so the problem is, after a few years of this, there were small bits of people talking about VR accessibility, but to this day, really nothing much has happened in that arena. The PlayStation VR 2 does support the PlayStation text-to-speech, but I think Sony has largely kind of forgotten that they created the PlayStation 2 VR, that it exists, and so there's not really all that much support for it. And so I don't really want to buy another $500 headset. And as far as Oculus goes, I would love to get the Oculus Quest 3, because there is a game called Cosmonious High. Alchemy Labs has been one of the main game developers that has really considered aspects of game accessibility from the beginning. Like their original game, Job Simulator, is still one of my favorites. But
that's a VR game?
Yeah, Job Simulator. Okay. What that game is basically it's this cartoony game, and you are playing this human in the future. There's this museum of jobs, and these robots. You go through these little scenarios of this is what robots thought humans did for work in the past. So one of them is you're they call it a gourmet chef, but you're putting things in the microwave and on the grill or in a blender. There's a gas station clerk where you're behind the gas station and you're passing out lottery tickets and checking people out and shenanigans. There's a auto mechanic where you're basically ripping people off, and it's hilarious. There's an office worker where I'm thinking Office Space. You're oh, can you make this memo? Or we're not looking too good. Can you cook the books here a little bit? And it's just hilarious. But they've always considered accessibility And in the new game Cosmonious High, they support things like narration, text to speech, and some audio description and things like that. And I would love to try it, but I'm not going to buy another headset until Oculus finally decides to implement some accessibility. Because one of my favorite stories I like to tell for the Oculus Quest is that when I first took it out of the box, the very first thing that they have you do, I needed sighted assistance for, even with my level of vision. So they had you take it out of the box, you sign into your Oculus account on your phone, and then you look at the headset, you turn it on, you look in it, and they give you like a, what is it, a 4-digit number, 6-digit number, and then you put that in the app, and then it'll pair. I knew exactly what I had to do. I knew how I had to do it, but I couldn't read the numbers because they were too small and they were too far away. So I had to literally go across the hall to my neighbor and go, yeah, thankfully at the time I knew her a little bit. And I'm like, yeah, hey, this might sound weird, but can you put this headset on for like 2 seconds and read me the number in this? Because I can't read it. And then from there on, I was a little better. But literally the first thing I did when I took it out of the box, I couldn't do.
Wow. Yeah.
So I've taken a break from covering VR on my channel, I would say for the past year or two, because, for those types of reasons, I just got really tired of jumping through so many hoops. And so I would love to cover VR again in the future. I would love to play more VR in the future. And that's why I'm part of XR Access, that organization, because I'm hoping that things do change. But for now, I'm kind of on a hiatus with that.
That's totally understandable. Are there any accessibility features on any of the VR headsets?
Not really comprehensively.
No text to speech, I'm guessing.
No text to speech, really no magnification. Again, if a dashboard or if an app supports that 6 degrees of tracking, you might have some luck being able to lean in toward and view something closer. And the one feature that I did use in both headsets was they have this thing where in VR you hit or you hold a button to basically recenter you're recentering your view. So this is your new center of view. And so what I would do to get closer, I live in I have a small play area. So if I needed to get closer to something, I would back up all the way to the back of my play area, set that as my center, and then I could get even closer forward because then I would be able to walk further ahead or lean further ahead to try to read or look at something in detail. But that's about it.
That kind of reminds me, I did get the chance to try the Vision Pro. It does have a lot more accessibility features, though it doesn't have a lot of games, at least at the time.
Right.
But one thing that I was frustrated at is if it's a picture or something, like you can use Zoom, but if I try to lean forward, there would be a point at which it would just fade away. And I'm like, no, come back here.
Yes, that is also a problem. It would either fade away, or if you got too close, you would kind of clip through it.
Since it is VR, it was harder to find things because it could be anywhere, not just on a screen.
And I have not gotten a chance to try the Vision Pro. It's really funny because sometimes Apple is just so weird because they go out of their way. Well, no, we're not something. We're not VR. We're spatial computing. No, you're a VR headset. Get over it. Because when they do that, they're basically dismissing the types of content you could have in that type of experience. And from everything that I've seen so far, your Zoom, it'll magnify like your flat windows that appear in midair, but it won't magnify the stuff that's outside of those windows. What I was originally hoping is that like your iPhone has a built-in magnifier. If I could, if the cameras were good enough, or if they had like the built-in magnifier app where I could put the headset on and treat it like an iris vision or something and just magnify my real world, that would be badass.
That really would be. It really would be.
But they didn't do that. I'm like, oh, and so no, I'm not going to pay almost $4,000 for that right now.
Yes, that's the one feature that everybody was asking for.
Yeah. And it's frustrating because I would love to play with one. So like, if Apple would just, give me one to, review or play with, I would gladly. do it.
I feel you. Overall, though, over the years, do you think that the gaming industry's accessibility and their perspective and what they've implemented has improved?
Yes, I do. There's a lot left to do, but even I would say, accessibility in gaming has really taken off. I would say from around 2015 is when I really started noticing a little bit more
Mm.
trickles of, oh, here's a little announcement. Back then it was kind of rare to find consistent subtitles or a few really low hanging fruit as far as easy things to implement accessibility wise. And
Mm.
here we are almost 10
Mhm.
years later. We have games that have like again, something like the Last of Us series where you can, if you're totally blind, you can play, a fully 3D action game. You can play a simulation racing game. Mortal Kombat 1 has got a phenomenal, narration, and you can access all the modes and move lists and things. And even indie games are what really kicked off a lot of this. Things like Sequence Storm back in the day, which is a rhythm racing game for PC. Stories of Blossom, a nice little kid-friendly storybook graphic adventure, point-and-click adventure style game. Things like Upheaval and War Sim, which are more kind of really in-depth kind of text games. And the one trend that I really like that I'm seeing right now is there are still games being made specifically for blind and low vision players, audio games, text games, but I'm not seeing as many of those recently. And what I'm seeing more is more mainstream games that are happening to either natively add accessibility or at least be moddable with accessibility.
Mm.
And I think that's a great thing because, I'm all for games that are designed for blind players and stuff too. But if you look at the last 10, 15 years, I mean, look at even all the games that came out on iOS when everyone flocked to that platform
Mm.
was you get a developer, it might be a small team, one person team, and you'll get a game or two out of them, and then they realize, "Huh, I can't support myself this way. I'm not making enough money. Everybody's asking for free codes or coupon codes, and I'm not charging a lot to begin with. And if I'm going to keep updating this game, and so I just can't afford to do it." So we've seen so many games or so many
Mm.
companies go under,
Yes,
or you'll
true.
see games being delisted. I mean, apps as well. But like, I'm not saying that designing things specifically for blind is bad, but you have to have the resources to do it or
Hmm.
offer, some way to support yourself. And so, like I said, we've seen so many of these games and apps go away. But I'm glad that we're starting to see, more mainstream games, and that way we're playing the same games or using the same
Exactly.
apps as everybody
Hmm.
else is, and they can offset that because they're making up. So it's like, oh, they can sell to thousands of people because unfortunately, sighted people, even if it's a really cool audio experience, they kind of like their pretty picture. They seem to be lost when it's like, what do you mean I can't look at something? I have to use my ears? What?
That's so true.
I'm very, we have audio description in some games for cutscenes. Just the types of games that we're allowed to play. A lot of the, not again, not saying anything bad, but like the complexity and the variety of mainstream games just offers so much more. They hold my attention more.
Hmm.
So to see more of those available, I mean, there's still loads and loads of games that aren't accessible yet, but
Mm,
we're making
definitely.
we're making pretty good progress, and I'm
Yeah.
happy to see that. Even just hearing a month or two ago that Japan has some sort of, I can't remember what it's called, but some sort of game accessibility initiative.
I wonder when Nintendo is going to make the Switch and their games accessible.
I'm not holding my breath, but I
Mm.
really, really, really hope that Nintendo for their next Switch, I really hope that they implement something comparable to Sony and Microsoft because I like the Zoom feature that they have now.
Hmm.
Boy, would I kill for text to speech though.
Yes, yes, but it's not even just the interface, so that would be great.
Right.
But So many of their games have so much text. You look at Animal
Yes.
Crossing, you look at, Pokemon. I'm just like, I can sit here and read the text, but it takes forever.
Amen. No, I'm the exact same way. And, it's really funny because I've kind of jokingly, you see how even like the third party developers, that make your Japanese RPGs, so many of those are fully voiced now. And
Mhm.
I keep joking that Nintendo needs to get out of the silent movie or the mime era because
Mm.
you see like the Zelda games and like all you hear is like hey or just some weird grunt and then they're just waving back and forth and swaying back and forth like dude just I don't care if Link doesn't speak but for the love of God please make your other characters speak
Yes,
or
please.
Animal Crossing instead of the
Yes.
gibberish.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
instead of
hate
gibberish
it.
just use your word like using I know it's a little bit more because you have to pay voice actors
Mm.
and stuff but come
I
on
mean,
Nintendo's loaded.
I wouldn't even mind if it wasn't voice actors, but I mean, there's already text there. Why
Right.
can't even just a text to speech option just read it
Oh
out
yeah,
for
I would be
you?
fine with that.
I would be
Absolutely.
totally fine with that. I don't care if it's the same voice for everything. Maybe for
Right.
artistic purposes, they don't like that. But I'm like, I just want it to read it for me. It just makes it so much easier.
No, I 100% agree. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I'm not so much into Pokemon, but I love the Zelda games, and
Hmm.
even your big Zelda games recently. Like, aside from maybe a couple like major cutscenes, everything is text.
Yeah, I mean,
And
even
that's fine if
Mario.
you want to have
And
Link as the silent protagonist, but
yeah.
all your other characters should speak. Like, we have the technology, we have the storage. Please do
Hmm.
it.
Can you share some game recommendations for fellow blind or visually impaired gamers? I know you've mentioned a whole bunch, but if you could just, burst out with a whole
Sure,
bunch.
sure. First off, I would say, if you're new to all this accessible gaming, I would say start with the platforms that you already have. So if you have an iPhone, if you have an Android phone, if you have a PC, those are good places to start because there are a lot of games on those. If you're looking at a console, and it depends on what games you want to play. If you really want to play Forza, that's only going to be Microsoft. That's only going to be Xbox or PC. The nice thing about that is you can do that on a PC. But keep in mind also PC. If you want to play modern games on the PC, like The Last of Us and Forza, you can't get by with your $400 bargain basement PC. Even though you might not be
Mm.
looking at the game still has to render everything, even at low to medium settings, to run smoothly enough. So you're going to want to have a PC that has a decent enough graphics card to be able to play some of these current and future games, especially big AAA games. But as far as like consoles go, Forza Motorsport, great example of a racing game, and that's on Xbox. Mortal Kombat 1 is on all of your platforms PC, Xbox, PlayStation. I don't know if the Switch one has accessibility in it. I don't know because I've heard that the game run the Switch hardware it's old and it doesn't run super
Mhm.
well anyway. Um, but Mortal Kombat 1 is good. Of course, you have The Last of Us 1 and 2 on the PlayStation 5. Stories of Blossom. Brock the Investigator is a cool little point and click adventure game, and then every so often you get into these little like Double Dragon style fighting, brawler elements. And that one actually even works on Switch. He even put
Hmm.
the accessibility features on the Switch version, so you pretty much can get that on any platform. The Veil, the VALE, the Veil is on PC and Xbox. That's another one. That's an audio game. Sequence Storm again, that was on PC. Um, Upheaval, that's a PC game. War Sim, that's an accessible PC game. iOS, there's a lot of those are more like there's not as many audio games these days because some of them have kind of gone away. But there are some. I mean, there's so many. There's a lot of word games. There's a lot of text adventure style games. Oh, one graphic novel game that I was starting to play through recently on PC. Slay the Princess is a really interesting, kind of twisted graphics adventure game. Um, but like a lot of your iOS games, there's puzzle games. There's, everyone loves Dice World. That's been a thing forever.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, heard that one.
Cheap plug. If you go to my YouTube channel and you go by the playlists and you just look up your PC accessible game spotlight or your iOS accessible game spotlight, those are playlists for games, whether PC, Xbox, PlayStation. Those are where you're going to find the games that I've covered that I would consider to be playable, even if you have no usable vision. My low vision spotlights are games that I play using the vision that I have. So, um, like I said, there's so many, there's too many to name, which is a good problem to have. But,
Definitely. Yeah.
but yeah, so I would say, audiogames.net. Look up AppleVis while you can if you want to look there. Um, and then check out those accessible game spotlight playlists on my channel.
Yeah, you guys heard Jesse. Make sure to go check out his channel. And the last question is just a fun little question that we do here.
Sure.
What's your favorite color and what's your favorite drink?
Hmm. Favorite color, I would have to say, is blue. I like
Awesome.
blue. Um, Favorite drink? If I need a quick pick me up, I'm rather fond of Mountain Dew, I have to say, or Mellow Yellow if you're in this area of the country. There's the Coke's version of that. And the nice thing about that is you can also kick it up a notch if you want to spike that with some brandy. Hey, that's pretty good too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jesse, for all your recommendations and chatting with me today. It's been great, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be really interested in this one. So thanks
Sure.
again.
Thanks again for inviting me.
That's the interview. Jesse is such an awesome person, and it was such a pleasure talking to him. I agree with Jesse. There's been a lot of positive movement in gaming accessibility, but there's still those things that are just so difficult. Even if I have some vision, menus and interfaces are so difficult, and reading. I just don't understand why the text is already there. And we've had TTS engines for the longest time. Why can we not just have it be read out? I don't understand. Everything should be compatible with a screen reader. Nintendo, I am talking directly to you. I do remember a time where they didn't always have captions. Jesse reminded me of this, and what's funny is I'm low vision, my brother is deaf, and my brother is the gamer of the household, okay? He's really good, and he has a huge Steam library. But he is deaf, and I'm blind. And I remember countless hours in our basement when we were younger. That's where we had the TV, and I would be finger spelling, letter spelling, because I wasn't very good at signs. I'm still not, but at least now I know a lot more signs. But I would finger spell everything that was spoken aloud in video games, and then he'd like move my head to where I need to look at for things that were really hard for me to see. I'm like, where is it? Where's this? Where's that? And he would like help me with that. And there were times where, it's only text on the screen. And I had to like just put my face really, really close to the TV. That was not good for your eyes, but I did it anyway. Sorry, Mom. And I would read that, and it would take me forever back then. And it still takes me forever. And I would probably play a lot more games if everything was more accessible. I just don't have as much patience as some people out there. I know some people who are totally blind that even if it's not accessible, they will go through so much to just play. And I think that's absolutely amazing. I just don't have that amount of patience. What do you guys think about gaming accessibility? Are you excited for how gaming accessibility is trending? And what are your favorite accessible games? Leave it in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts. That's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening and for watching. Give it a like down below if this was enjoyable for you. Give the podcast a rating if you're listening on a podcast app, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel and what I do here in my work, consider becoming a COA member on YouTube or Patreon, or just sharing this video or this podcast with a friend. Thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you all in the next one. Take care.